Arc 6, The Corridor of Memories. Chapter 4, The Reason to Bring You Out. The conquering of the deathly Audiobook sand dunes in order to reach the Pleiades watchtower. The demon beast manipulator Meili joined Subaru's group as a member that would boost their confidence in escaping from the sand maze, a maze containing dens of demon beasts. They had decided to bring her with them. However, this girl had continued to be the sole person residing in the confinement room of the mansion for a long, restricted period of a whole year because she was helping Roswell. Subaru knew that there would naturally be arguments over releasing Meili from her confinement, considering there was an event where she attacked the mansion through treacherous bowel hunting, but Meili, there's nothing wrong with it, is there? If people other than Emilia-sama and Subaru-kun are coming too, then there shouldn't be any problem with me leaving as well, should there? Even if my judgment was inaccurate and she turns out to have bad intentions, you guys are the ones that she'd aim for, you know. Roswell readily gave Meili permission to leave after that. The specifics of his answer were the type of specifics that you couldn't help but admit that they indeed sounded like things Roswell would say. But anyways, she had gained his permission for now. Thus, Meili was able to be safely released from her confinement that she had been in for a whole year. Meili, Just as I thought, the atmosphere outside is so different. Being in that cramped room for so long made it hard for me to breathe. Subaru, but still, he tried doing a lot of different things to make you feel otherwise, huh? It wasn't as bad as you say it was, you know? Meili, really? I appreciate the consideration, but being able to freely move with your body is a whole different feeling. Oni-san, if you don't learn to appreciate the small things, you'll be hated by Oni-san and Ojo-chan long before you know it, you know how. Meili pouted with her lips while holding her plethora of stuffed animals. By the way, the person Meili was referring to when she said Oni-san was Emilia, while the person she was referring to when she said Ojo-chan was Beatrice. She would refer to Petra as Petra-chan, Garfield as Fong Oni-san, and thus she'd reasonably refer to Otto as weak-looking person. Meili, can I rest in this room? Subaru, as far as from what I've been told, there shouldn't be problem. Someone came in to clean this place despite it being a room that isn't used very often, so you shouldn't feel uneasy about it being dirty or anything like that. Frederica should have came to clean the room right around the time we brought our luggage out as well, so. Meili, okay. There was this place within the western wing of Roswell's mansion. This place was the room that Meili continued to look around curiously, the inside of the room that was located at the corner of the private maid room. Meili thoroughly tried to experience just what it was like to be free from confinement. Of course, it was necessary to have someone look over the mansion, so that it wasn't neglected. But what exactly was her role? Was she a guest? Was she a maid? Her role wasn't far off from a guest, but it would also be unfair to miss the part of her that made her a maid. Thus, she would be labeled as a cooperative worker of the mansion, as it would have been insufficient to call her a maid, and it would have been insufficient to call her a guest. She would take care of this one room on the maid floor, as if it represented the second half of her internal body. She brought in each of her belongings that were previously kept in her confinement room, making it seem as if this bland room was being dyed with color. Meili, even if I've been freed like this, I don't know how long I'll be staying here, you know. When a prospect that looks like an opportunity to live peacefully rises, I might immediately run away, after all. Subaru, well, what's most important is that you don't cause trouble. So, as long as you don't bring me to that frightening mother of yours, you can do whatever you'd like. Oh, but I'll make sure you carry out your next job properly. After that, then you can do whatever you want. Meili, you're saying that when it's all taken care of, I can die wherever I want? Subaru, I have to even hear about stuff like that? Why would I care about where someone dies? That's what the cynical, pretentious me of the past would say, but I won't say stuff like that now. After Subaru set down all her belongings into the room, he petted Meili's head as she stood still at the window. This girl with braided, chestnut hair twinkled her eyes as Subaru continued to pet her head. Subaru, I want my gang to be prepared to honestly risk their lives no matter what. You can be out however much you want, but if you're going to be out like that, you might as well follow the one thing the letter said, that is, you should just enjoy this time as genuinely as you can. He gave a light pat to her head at the end of his statement, and then brought his hand back. After receiving a light tap to her head from the hand that previously caressed her hair, Meili glared at Subaru with scornful eyes. Meili, Oni-san, did you win over Ojo-chan and Petra-chan like that? Geez, even being in constant caution of you isn't enough. Subaru, that actually wasn't my intention, you know. After Subaru finished helping Meili bring her personal belongings in, he scratched his head and then headed towards the room's exit. He did not have any intention of possibly helping with the rearrangement of the room upon completing the task of bringing in her stuff. On top of that, there was a helpless wall separating Subaru's sense of rearrangement and Meili's sense of rearrangement. Thus, he decided that it would be best to depart before doing anything unnecessary that would cause her to dislike him. Meili, well, I'll take your words with a grain of salt. Besides, you're going to be throwing your life away soon at the Audiobook sand dunes anyway. Subaru, we aren't going to throw away our lives, we're going to assemble our lives. And that's where we'll be heavily relying on your powers, so we'll be counting on you. Meili, okay. Meili swung her hand back and forth, and then led Subaru out of the room while holding one of his hands. She brought out each of her belongings out from a box wearing an indifferent face, while avoiding looking at Subaru, and her belongings started to form a temporary arrangement of her own room. Just like Meili said, this was a room that made her feel like she didn't know how long she would be staying, nor did she know if she'd return. Meili, I'm having fun, This girl indulged herself in her own room as she walked around with a gait that exemplified unrestrained enthusiasm. He was able to partially see the pleasant side of the liveliness of this girl, which was a liveliness that was exhibited from being satisfied simply by having all of her favorite stuffed animals set down all around the room. It was a type of liveliness that was reminiscent of how a girl of her age would react when she got her very own first room. With the decision of adding Meili to the group, the participants in the exciting tour to question the sage would include this group of 7, Subaru, Emilia, Beatrice, their followers that would be helping from the outskirts, i.e. the 3 people who were Juukulius, Anastasia, and Meili, and then finally the sole girl that they'd finally be able to bring out, Rem. These were the final 7 members who would face the Audiobook sand dunes located at the eastern end of the world. The direction towards the Audiobook sand dunes, which was a place that was located far off in the world and was a place that was far away from their group, resembled a straight line that pointed towards due east from the eastern Roswell mansion. However, this journey had a path that was longer than the path one would be required to take to head towards the Watergate city Pristella. It would take close to 20 days for just a one-way trip. In other words, this journey would take a total of 40 days just to go there and back. They would safely arrive at the watchtower, and if they thought about staying there for a couple of days, the length of this large expedition could very well turn into something like 2 months instead. The problem with this was that Subaru, Petra. Sorry for leaving you alone. I'll make you feel better. Petra, don't worry. I'm not angry. It's fine. Subaru-sama can go to as many faraway, dangerous places as he wants, just like he always has, right? Petra was yielding to the harsh depression that resulted from having to stay behind in Pristella for a period of a month, which would soon become a period of 2 months. This girl walked impetuously around the mansion with a cold, clear face as she waved around her maid outfit, an outfit that was befitting for her petite body. As for Subaru, he was apologizing behind her, and was in the midst of running out of words to say to try and fix her mood. Anyways, while it was necessary for Subaru to become this frantic to figure out how to fix Petra's mood, girls also had this common assumption about guys in regards to their mood. This common assumption was that, in all times and all places, whenever they became displeased like this, it was usually the guy's fault. In reality, Petra was the girl with the most prominent girl power in the mansion. She would proudly display this girl power as the representative for the girls. The only possible unfortunate men in this mansion that could have possibly harmed her mood were Subaru, Roswell, Garfield, Otto. Wait a second, isn't that a lot of people? And wait, weren't all guys unfortunate when it came to power? Puck would also have to adopt this power of pathetic men, as he had to do so in order to carry out his revival. It was beyond pathetic. But anyways, Subaru, I know that leaving you behind with Roswell at the mansion would stress you so much that it would make it hard for you to breathe, but if you were to just reason that it was just another job and did your best to go. Petra, I don't get mad over things like that. I'm not a kid. Stop saying weird things like that when I have Ram-ne-sama and Frederica-ne-sama. Subaru, to think a girl who headbutts the pit of a man's stomach could claim that she's not a child is just. Petra causing Subaru to faint in agony with a strike to a vital part of his body truly resembled anger. She stuck a prideful pose as she held her waist with both of her hands, and she stuck out her chest to insistently convince him that her appearance resembled a figure that was indicative of anything but a kid. However, a lady's spirit is something that is completed before her body catches up. As for Beatrice, her body's growth rate would not catch up at all, so it felt like her spirit was being dragged along as well, but Subaru, but Petra, didn't you start this headbutt from a higher place than your previous one? Well, even then, it felt like there was a small moment at the start of your previous headbutt where you were on your tiptoes before you came flying towards my bosom. Petra, I'm dumbfounded. Didn't Beatrice tell you? Hey. Look. I'll grow up in a month too, as my back has grown, my legs have grown, and hasn't my face become cute as well? Subaru, I guess you did grow a bit? Your back and your hair, I mean. Although, your face was cute from the beginning. Petra was already the beauty of the Earlham village. Being lured away from the mansion as one of its maids at the time was a complicated situation, as Petra had this fixed image of a girl that everyone wanted to marry. To be more specific, you could cause a sumo wrestling tournament to unfold in the center of the plaza if you challenged these crybabies. The adults would barge in at the end, and the celebration of lifting the somehow beaten-up Subaru into the air would reach its end. It would be an enigmatic rite of passage. Anyways, Petra was this girl who was loved by the villagers. She was a girl who often expressed her sorrow from helping with the mansion. He wanted to use the convenience of having her in the mansion as much as possible for the sake of the extraordinary Petra in the future. That being said, at the same time, Subaru had no power within the mansion, so he would cherish these days to such an extent so that he would continue on without forgetting this type of ordinary life. Although Subaru, also, you weren't able to be the extremely playful girl that you are. As for your sister with her well-known temper, I am aware of how you feel suffocated from having her tell you to work all the time. Petra, it's not like that though. Subaru let both of his arms open to console the pouting girl. Petra showed a slightly hesitant gesture, and then she jumped into Subaru's arms. He hugged her small body, and then petted her head as if it was to reward her. Petra, Subaru-sama, you're going to do something dangerous again? Subaru, it's not as if it's completely decided that it's going to be dangerous, you know? Actually, it kinda sounds like I'm saying that you shouldn't consider the possibility of it being dangerous, but the truth is that it really might be a reasonably safe expedition. Petra, what's the probability of each outcome? Subaru, I guess it would be a ratio of 8:2, with the safe outcome being the lowest, maybe? Petra, to me, that sounds like it'd be pretty dangerous then. Revealing something late into the conversation and not being able to lie were two of Subaru's unfortunate tendencies. Subaru felt like Petra started to become displeased while being held in his arms. He let out a sigh, as he did not understand why she started to act like this. Suddenly, Petra started to rub her forehead against his stomach. Petra, I'm worried. Subaru-sama is always like this, ever since you first came to the mansion, and ever since I met you at the village. You're gonna go take diligent action all over the place again, even when it seems so dangerous. It would be nice if you would learn a thing or two from my lazy master. Subaru, nah. Even though Roswell gave his stamp of approval, he probably still sweats from his forehead when we aren't there to see it. I agree that he's useless when it comes to life-threatening matters though. Petra, it was rough with the demon beasts, it was rough with the witch cult, it was rough with the dirt spiders, it was rough with the goddess statue, it was rough at the Elier forest, and it was rough cleaning the graves too. Despite all that, you still fought with the witch cult at Pristella, and then Otto and the others still fought. Subaru, Otto nearly killed us back then. Otto died too much. Amazingly enough, Subaru was in complete agreement with this, but he wished that he wouldn't simply die. If Otto were to die, Subaru could no longer let himself die, not to exaggerate it as a friendship that would continue through death or anything like that though. Petra, why can't someone other than Subaru-sama do it? Someone, another person, you should just leave it up to someone stronger or something like that, like Master, since he has the time. Subaru, I understand. I understand just how much frustration you've had piled up because of how Roswell wastes his time so often. Stop trying to add things on in attempts to drive Roswell off to his death. It creates an intense amount of tension in the camp. It wouldn't be a problem if it was just things like Roswell not noticing how Petra put squeezed juice from cloth into his tea. However, it would obviously be bad if she started to clearly show her hostility and malice. Subaru let out a commanding voice before it would turn out like this, but Petra eyed Subaru with a serious look. It seemed like half-assed deception and insincere words wouldn't be able to convince her. Also, above all, Petra was seriously worried about Subaru's safety. Saying anything unnecessary and careless in this situation would be disrespectful to Petra's feelings of anxiety. Subaru, well, I get your point. I really do. It's true that there seems to be demon beasts on the way to the Sage's Tower, it's true that the desert's maze is rumored to be ridiculous. And I know how ridiculous it is in the first place to aim for the Sage, who would become irritated by us coming close to the tower, but even then, there's no way in hell I'd leave this up to someone else. Petra, why? Subaru-sama, aren't you perhaps overestimating your own strength? Just let Gafo-san make an embarrassing assumption like that. Subaru, your critical strictness is seriously ridiculous. There's no way in hell I'm gonna leave it up to Garfield. Petra's critical standards were so harsh that it would make a man tremble if he heard them. It would be appropriate to characterize Garfield's attitude towards his weakness as one of making false expectations while being unfazed. However, Garfield made sure to put in earnest efforts to change these false expectations into reality. Also, in this case, the problem was probably the fact that he'd interpret his ability to make false expectations as strength. The matter at hand thus could not be handled by Garfield, considering his interpretation of his strength and his actual strength. Subaru, well, putting the juxtaposition of Garfield's impression and his way of thinking aside, it's not like I think there isn't a person out there that's more suitable for the job. And first of all, leaving everything up to Reinhard would be safer in all kinds of ways if there were preparations to escape the desert maze. Petra, then why don't you let him do it? Subaru, I wonder why. Despite being someone who's fond of being spoiled, I thought I was someone that didn't yearn for honor. In actuality, he really did not understand why he desired to do it like this. His audacious words would simply take form in this way. Whenever his audacious words took form, it would probably become something like such, maybe. Subaru, never mind. This is something I want to do myself after all. Even if there might be someone more suited for it out there, even though I know there'd be a higher chance of success that way, I still want to do it. Petra, why? Subaru, it's embarrassing, but it's because I want to be the first one to see her when she wakes up. He didn't specify who. Even if he didn't specify, Petra understood who it was. If a way to wake up that girl, the girl who continued to be in a state of deep slumber, was found at the Sage's Tower, he wanted to be the one to seize it. Even if there might be someone else out there who'd be more suitable for the job, even if someone other than himself would have a higher chance of success, this was the sole thing he wouldn't give up. He didn't want to give it up. This was Subaru's ego. Subaru, if I were to disregard my feelings and think of it from a rational viewpoint, anyone could be the one to wake her up. If something like a ridiculous disease of never being able to wake up were to spread, and if we were to only talk about saving them, I wouldn't care about who'd be the one to develop a vaccine or a specific medicine for it. I wouldn't care about the process if it meant saving them. Petra, yeah. Subaru, but if my feelings drive in, I want to do things my way. I want to be the one to save them. I want to be the one to wake them up. I want to give it my all and save everything. Thus, Natsuki Subaru would be the one to go. There were countless others who were stronger. There were countless others who were more reliable. There were countless others who were wiser. There were countless others of class who were more wonderful. But Natsuki Subaru would ignore all of that, and he would be the one to go. He did this only because he wanted to be praised by this girl after he saved her. Subaru, sorry for disappointing you with my selfishness. Petra, you really did disappoint me. Nothing you said changes my feelings. Petra, After her acknowledgement of Subaru's shamefulness, Subaru petted Petra's head while he was prepared for hatred. But after Petra let out an unclear voice, she lifted her head from Subaru's arms. Subaru was surprised when her round, large eye became clouded by a giant teardrop. And then, Petra, EY. Subaru, another headbutt. Petra swung her pointy head downward, and then her forehead caused great pain to the pit of Subaru's stomach. Petra aimed at Subaru's defenseless vitals, which made Subaru fall to his knees, and then she escaped from his arms with an anticlimactic leap. She then closed one of her eyes and stuck out her tongue. Petra, Subaru-sama, you idiot. You're selfish. Why don't you just go do whatever you want? Subaru, you. Petra, because when 2 months pass and you return, I'll surprise you by becoming a really beautiful girl. Feel free to regret not being able to see that growth up close by. Subaru, there really is something unfortunate about that. It's not normal for a kid to change during their growth period so suddenly. But Petra was also a glamorous 13-year-old. After 2 months passed, she just might have a completely different impression. Subaru, to tell you the truth, I also grew 19 centimeters between the 7th and 8th grade. Petra, that seems a little impossible. Well, this was a rare case where Subaru grew because his original height was short. Although Petra broke down the size of his expectations that he bet on, this girl grasped her fist soon after the event. She then thrust both of her fists towards Subaru and made a declaration. Petra, anyways. What you should do is, go ahead and travel towards dangerous places like you want, worrying everyone and troubling everyone, and after that, come back like you always do. Subaru, it sounds like I'm a pretty big nuisance to others when you say that. Although, when you looked at it that way, the way she described him surprisingly didn't sound wrong. Anyhow, Subaru pushed out both of his hands as well, and then he matched Petra's fist with his own. Subaru, it's always troubling for Petra, but I'll carelessly head towards dangerous places like I always do, and you just wait for me to return like normal after I'm done with doing various things one after another. It is Petra's own special right to welcome us back once we return from our journey. Petra, you won't let Frederica Ne-sama or Ram Ne-sama say it before me, right? Subaru, yeah. I promise. Petra, including Master? Subaru, even if you don't worry about that, I'd get hit by Roswell if he were to be the first one to appear when we come back. Petra, I understand. Alright, that convinces me. She pulled back her fist that was matched with Subaru's, and then triumphant spirits started to flow into the sighing Petra. The flow was substantial, and should have looked like a big form of forgiveness, but Petra, geez, Subaru-sama can't be helped. It kind of felt like she was saying this statement in a way that made it seem as if she was talking to everyone. He couldn't be matched. Those were Subaru's thoughts. Although he wasn't worried to the point of anxiety, in order to settle an uncertain matter that lied within the mansion, Subaru would finally step inside that room. Entering this room was the only time Subaru would naturally hold his breath and lighten his footsteps. But even if he were to enter the room, while singing loudly and tapping with his footsteps, the situation within the room definitely wouldn't change. Still, perhaps he unconsciously decided to withhold the silence within the room simply for the sake of the girl who laid down on the bed within the room, whose figure would cause pain to swell up within his chest if he were to look at it excessively. It was a deep sleep where, if she were to be able to wake up even right at this moment, he would wish for her to wake up. However, he felt that even if that were to happen, if he were to disturb her deep sleep, he would suffer a punishment of some sort, similar to a curse. This girl, who sunk into a deep sleep of everlasting dreams, was precious to him to such degree. Subaru, I say that, but that of course is just my own overly subjective belief, huh? Saying those words with a tone of disbelief, Subaru pulled out a chair aside the bed to sit on. Just like that, 1 month had passed, and he stepped foot into this room, meeting the face of a sleeping REM, whose state showed no change from 1 year ago, now as well continuing to be in a state of deep slumber. Subaru, I'm back, but I'm sorry for coming to see you so late. I had some business to take care of, and on top of that I showed a bit of hesitation, making this visit very last minute. It was obvious, but of course, there was no response from REM, who was in a deep slumber. Subaru reached out with his voice, despite knowing the fact that there would be no response, and held a calm expression even then. Natsuki Subaru held this expression that he would expose only to this specific girl. He owned this determined expression, indicating he was ready to throw something away, that he would only show to Emilia. He owned this faithful expression, that made it seem as if he would be able to entrust his life, that he would only show to Beatrice. And then he owned this expression that exposed his weaknesses which he so often tried to conceal, the expression that he would only show to REM. Subaru, I wonder if it's okay if I talk. Actually, there's so many things I can talk to you about, you know? Sadly, I wasn't able to visit you before because I was at the Watergate City Pristella, but there still really was a lot of things that happened there. It was such a big uproar that, even if I talked to you about it all night, there still would be more for me to tell you. But even then, I have plenty of time in the world to talk to you about all that. Subaru gently slipped his hand within the bed, searching for the hand of the girl, who had a towel blanket up to her chest, and began to make a speech upon grasping Rem's hand. Within her long fingertips, with her slender, pale arms, her gentleness and existence of her warmth were evident, but for some reason it felt as if the circulation of her blood, no, a sign of life within her, was missing. A lone force within her was preserving the life within her. However, there was no force within her that was fulfilling the role of moving that life forward. REM, with this contradictory situation going on within her, still had her time frozen, trapped within a state of deep slumber. However, Subaru, I might finally reach you. Subaru, of course, it's also possible for me to make my expectations too high and not end up being satisfied. Of course, it's also possible for the sage to fail to live up to her name and end up with nothing, only to have her apologize for her inaccurate information in the end. Subaru, but a clear way of a solution other than defeating gluttony finally is coming into sight. Although other people would have expectations, and would become disappointed at the solutions that were available as a result of following a journey like this, the answer that he followed this road for still resembled a symbol of hope that he would finally seem to be able to lay his hands on. Subaru, because Echidna freaked out and didn't listen. Within the sanctuary, within the witch's graveyard, when he was invited to that surreal tea party, meeting the Witch of Greed along with Echidna, Subaru rejected the witches, escaping from the control of their hand. Natsuki Subaru made this decision in order to protect his own fragile soul, but at the same time it was a decision that distanced himself from people who could have, possibly, helped him find a way to save REM. Of course, he wasn't aware the extent to which Echidna held an opinion of the archbishops brandishing their power. But maybe, if he still were to reveal his circumstances, perhaps he would have been able to come up with a solution after hearing the witch's input. He was confident that he made the right decision, and his immediate rejection of the witch's demands was something that resembled his determination. But time was running out, and when he became aware of the fact that it felt as if the nature of the passing seasons was leaving REM behind, he became worried about whether or not his decision was the correct one after all. Even if he promised from the bottom of his heart that he would save her, he himself had not yet taken any definite action that would achieve such. He had only been able to slip through from the feeling of entrapment he felt from the stalemate he had been in, and was finally now able to do something for her sake. In order to save the multitude of people, the multitude of men within the town of Pristella, who were suffering the same type of fate as REM, he went on a journey towards the Pleiades watchtower. However, if you were to point out his real motive, the real reason Subaru moved forward towards this watchtower was because of REM, nothing else was a real possible candidate for being his true reason. It was unreasonable and inappropriate, even while understanding that, Subaru continued to. Subaru, I will save you, REM. That is my oath. Just like she was there for Subaru during those fragile days, in those times now was the time when Subaru wanted to be the one there for her and offer his hand, in these times where REM needed someone's hand the most. That hurts. Subaru, Subaru, who had his eyes closed tight while speaking words of determination, heard that voice which made his face lift up abruptly. He took a look at REM with a look of inconceivable surprise within his eyes, only to find that she was laying there quietly with her eyes closed, holding onto Subaru's hand in silence. If that's the case, then whose voice? Ram, let go of her hand, Barusu. Just looking at how strongly you're holding her hand brings me pain. Subaru, oh, it's Ram. When Subaru looked back, he saw Ram standing and staring at him with a cold look in her eyes from the room's entrance. After being relieved by her look, he realized that he had been holding Ram's hand with his own hand tighter than he thought he was and quickly let go. Ram, it's okay, I can handle watching Subaru violate Ram's whitebait-like fingers out of his sexual desires. Subaru, can you not say it like that? That'll make me feel like the semblance of my previous determination completely turned into something loathsome. After Subaru let go of Ram's hand, Ram, who had stepped into the room, took her hand instead. The older sister gently caressed the slender, white fingers of her younger sister, and then looked at Subaru with a side glance. Ram, was your determination really that pure? Carefully reflect on yourself a bit more and make your speech again. If you unleash your sexual desires towards me, who looks extremely similar to Ram will also get the shivers up her back and run away. Subaru, calm down. Even though your physical appearances are extremely alike, I will never confuse myself when pointing out the difference in radiance held within between you two. Ram, is that so? I guess that's fine then. But even if you were to finally find a way to try to wake her up, if you were to meet again with her without remembering who she was, Ram's feelings would not be at peace. It would be surprising if she were to not hold any detest for you, if your depictions of her during our idle conversations were not just wild fantasies, that is. Subaru, just how little faith do you have in me? We've known each other for a long time now, you know. Ram, ha. Snorting with her nose like she always did, Ram indicated with her movements that she was about to leave her seat. Along with getting up from her seat, she took a look around the room and then. Ram, I need to get ready to leave, so someone also needs to prepare Ram's second set of clothes. There's not much sweat on her clothes, so changing them isn't really necessary, but her body still needs to be wiped off, so. Ram, something's widening below your nose, disgusting. Subaru, I didn't say anything because there wasn't really anything to say, but even when I don't say anything, this is the treatment I get. Taking care of Ram's body, the Ram who had her name and memories eaten was essentially unrelated to getting a reaction from her physical body. There was no real palpable practical reason for doing things like wiping her body and changing her clothes. The reason for doing such things was no more than to simply be able to occasionally comfort himself, being able to remind the people around her of her existence, not allowing it to be deserted. Looking at Ram with disdain, Subaru seemed like he was unreasonably about to act like one of the true people, but when he remembered the place he was in, he let go of his fist. Only considering the ultimate results from doing all this, actions like Subaru making a speech and Ram taking care of her younger sister's body, nothing really seemed to be indicative of moving forward. He didn't stop people from taking actions that could be considered pointless, because he realized that even if people didn't say it out loud, he knew that people still acknowledged the fact that their actions would not bring actual results. Subaru, isn't it about time for you to start feeling as if Ram is your real sister? Subaru asked this question unexpectedly to Ram, who, with her caring way of doing things, was looking at the figure of a sleeping Ram with her kindness. Even though Ram bravely took care of Ram, she had no memories of this girl who represented her other half. The girl was so similar to Ram that you couldn't possibly claim that they were unrelated. But if you solely considered Ram's true feelings about her, you could say that Ram's relation to Ram was a weak one. Still, days like these passed by for a whole year. Even though she had lost her memories of Ram, it was possible for new, different ones to form. Perhaps now definite memories were taking form within Ram. Ram, earnest feelings aren't things that sprout that easily. I still don't have memories of her in me, and I've never witnessed this girl in an awake state. Although I could imagine that she was probably someone of excellence and dignity, similar to myself. Subaru, sure, she was excellent, but I don't really have any memory of her being that dignified. Rather, there was a lot of times where she would surprisingly be in such a hurry to the point of being reckless, causing me to worry. Ram had this other reckless part of her that she would show on occasion. Ram responded to Subaru with an "I see" with a listless voice similar to the wind. Ram, speaking of memories that I do not remember, even if it's just for amusement, is nothing more than moving backwards. That's something I'm not very fond of, Barusu. Subaru, is that so? If you say so, then I'll stop. Ram, after she wakes up, if I regain my memories of her, even then, I'll have plenty of things to talk to her about. But even if, say, I don't regain them, if she just were to wake up, as much as she'd want to talk about, I would. Peeping into the face of her younger sister, Ram played with her bangs with an unchanging expression. Ram's hair freely drifting down from above her pale forehead, Ram let out a small sigh. Her expression was one that seemed cruel yet gentle to Subaru. Even if she remembered nothing, even if she lost her memories of her, it wasn't as if their bond had disappeared. Even if it had disappeared, it wasn't as if it wouldn't intertwine again. Those were Subaru thoughts. Subaru, well, leave all that to me. I'll conquer the sage's watchtower and then definitely make Rem wake up. And then you two sisters will have your emotional reunion. Thus, Subaru said these words in an excessively bright manner, with a deliberately loud voice. If anything, this moment between Subaru and Rem didn't fit the quiet atmosphere within the room. Subaru made this speech, only to have Ram look back at him with an extremely confused look. Ram, what are you saying, Barusu? Subaru, huh? After that, Ram looked at Subaru with a look that made it seem like Subaru looked like an idiot. Ram will also accompany you on this next journey, so putting it that way is pretty condescending. If it's going to be an emotional reunion, Ram will act on her own accord. Subaru, that's news that I haven't heard before, you know. In response to Subaru widening his eyes in surprise, Ram looked at Subaru with an even more despising look. Even if she looked at him with that look, he couldn't know what he hadn't been told about, and he couldn't be aware of things that he couldn't have heard about, so this was an unreasonable situation. In response to Subaru asking about what she was talking about, Ram held a manner of blocking her ears from his words with rejection. This day of preparation as well would gradually pass on, as they wouldn't be able to have a straightforward conversation. The decision for Ram to accompany him, with the goal of reuniting the sisters Ram and Rem. A journey beginning with the purpose of meeting the fortune-telling sage, a journey to conquer the Pleiades watchtower. In total there would be a sum of 8 participants of a large family. That was the type of situation that seemed to lie ahead. Chapter 5, each of their unease. Various discussions were had, along with complications with the travelers. Many problems were had when saying goodbyes to the people left behind, but still, the morning where they'd leave had finally arrived. Subaru, and so, it turned out to be a bigger group than I thought, but... Subaru folds his arms as he gazes at the people who would travel along the tour to conquer the sage's tower. The 2 camps to participate were the Amelia camp and Anastasia camp. Of course, the Amelia camp consisted of Subaru, Amelia, and Beatrice, along with Rem, who continued to sleep, and Ram, who accompanied her. It was a total of 5 people. There was Anastasia, the guide for the Agra sand dunes, and Juukulius, the knight. Then there was Meili, who was brought along as a Mabiste user to let them pass by the groups of Mabiests that were there at the sand dunes. If having a simple plan was the goal, then they had a lot of the people who were involved in rescuing Priest Ella, and in regards to commanding people, Subaru had experience with the subjugation of the white whale, as well as the battle with Sloth. However, simply moving towards faraway land, these 8 key people for that journey had no experience. Subaru, wonder if it'll actually be fine. Amelia, worried about something, Subaru? He tilts his head, and when he was imagining the distant future, he saw Amelia pop up in his vision. Subaru clears his throat with a hum at the girl wearing a lightweight dress for traveling afar and says, Subaru, when I think about the place we're going to, I can't stop being nervous. When I stop thinking about it, I feel afraid about going to a dangerous place with a large group of people, since it's hard to help everyone when there's that many people. Amelia, you may be right. Rem and Ram are coming along too. Subaru will have to be protected by Meili and Anastasia. Subaru, what the? I'm already being treated as someone who won't fight. Amelia, come on, Subaru. Obviously it's just a joke. You're going to take this seriously, after all. When Subaru suddenly screeched at Amelia, who made a fist, she started to laugh, as she couldn't handle it. Subaru laughed after that reaction, but the stiffness of his slight smile was forgiving of her joke. Amelia was actually a lot better in fights than Subaru. From Amelia's point of view, Subaru was someone who should be protected, of course. She didn't mean to think of him only as that, but... Subaru, the next specific thing to feel uneasy would be... When Subaru took a breather from his conversation with Amelia, he turned his attention towards the front. They were already at the Roswell residence's front garden, and the preparations to depart were going smoothly. Then, what Subaru saw was close to 10 people transporting a large passenger carriage. 2 earth dragons were linked together with their heads for pulling the dragon carriage. Both were races that were adequate to travel long distances. The problem was the situation next to the dragon carriage. There was the jet-black earth dragon casually standing still, and there was a small silhouette that came face to face with her snout as they glared at each other. Subaru lets out a shocked sigh at that situation, and he breaks in between the 2 that stared at each other. Subaru, you've been exaggerated as a Mabiste user, but can you not get along with earth dragons too? Meili, come on, Oni-san. Can you not misunderstand me? The only animals I can discipline are ones that are bad and have horns. Any other animal won't like me, as I'm someone who carries a stink. Subaru, so that's how it is, isn't it rough like that? Subaru shrugs his shoulders at Meili's explanation, and pets the nose of Patrash, who glared at her. When Subaru touched this very prideful female earth dragon, it took a blunt sniff of his hand's stink. It was as if she was doing this to override the stink of the girl in front of her with Subaru's stink. Subaru, it's really unusual to see Patrash be this blunt, as she is someone who is tolerant and good at being considerate. Seems like she's really hard to hit off with. Melee, I can be relevantly friendly with other animals, but that earth dragon is too attached to Oni-san. She is so attached that it feels like if I let my guard down, I will get bitten. Oni-san, if you don't discipline her properly, I'll become that animal's food, so be careful. Subaru, don't say such scary things like it's nothing, Patrash, whoa. Subaru calms down the slightly agitated loving dragon and lets Melee ride on it. Furthermore, this Mabeast user who traveled with them had little luggage. She was a girl who rarely carried any belongings. But even then, she brought the stuffed panda Subaru made. The childish charm she had was lovely. Anastasia, looks like you're having trouble Natsuki-kun, since you're always trying to please girls. Subaru, if you think so, then it'd make me happy if you could stop taking up my time. When he pushed Melee onto the dragon carriage, Anastasia called out to him with a teasing tone. Anastasia, even though she was called this, inside she was the white fox echidna. On the remaining 20 days from Priestella to the mansion, most of the differences were buried. Even if she would do Anastasia's job like this, it seemed like it would eventually become hard to tell them apart. Anastasia, I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't doubt me like that. Didn't I tell you that I have no motive? Hence, I volunteered to be your guy's guide for a dangerous path. Subaru, including that point too, my stance is that there's a possibility of you having various plans, considering your creator. I've said this many times too, so remember it. It's not like I don't want to believe you. It would make me feel a lot more at ease if I could believe you. Anastasia, it's not amusing being at a disadvantage like this by not remembering someone. It seems like my creator made me not have memory in order to displease you. Subaru. Anastasia, that's why you shouldn't get so angry. Geez, it's scary. When he glared at Iridna, who went back to herself midway, she went back to disguising herself as Anastasia and pouted with her lips. With that, she passed by Subaru and stepped into the dragon carriage. After that, the number of people was. Roswell, Subaru-kun, can I speak to you two for a bit? When he was called out to and turned around, he saw Roswell coming out of the mansion's entranceway. Next to the Margrave in a clown outfit, there was Emilia and Juukulius. Roswell turned towards them, thinking about how unusual the combination was, and looked at the three people as he closed one eye. Roswell, first off, I imagine that this journey will take almost 2 months. Just from that, I'm thinking about the unforeseen situations that might come along midway. If you have Emilia-sama and Anastasia-sama to deal with the problems every time, then I don't think there will be any serious errors, but. Emilia, yeah, you can count on me. It's not like I sat around being idle either, after all. Roswell, those words are reassuring. I'm honestly happy with Emilia-sama's growth. Alright, putting aside the unease along the journey as something that will be taken care of individually, there is one person you must pay attention to. It's Ram. Roswell said that with a lower voice, and it made Subaru and the others' expressions change. Emilia's eyes twitch, while Subaru's cheeks stiffen as if he was going into deep thought. And then Juukulius, the only person who was unrelated to the camp at this place, frowned slightly. Juukulius, about that, how about I stay with her? Sir Mathers, as Anastasia's knight, the state of camp affairs are, although I am a mere servant, I should understand that revealing them wouldn't be a good idea. Roswell, it's not like I proposed the idea without caring about anything and anybody. Juukulius Dano. After seeing your behavior at your mansion and the way you behave with Subaru-kun, I've come to understand that you are a reliable person. I would like you to think about that, in regards to the previous favor. Subaru, this is the shadiest you've sounded in a long time, Roshi. Emilia, sorry, I kinda thought so too. When Roswell replied to Juukulius worried with a serious voice, Subaru and Emilia both raised their hands up almost at the same time and teased him. Even without considering the previous offense, what Roswell said was too uncharacteristic of himself. He said it's not like that, perhaps because he himself was aware of how it was uncharacteristic. He gives a wry smile at Subaru and the others and says, Roswell, maybe my lack of persuasion just can't be helped. Juukulius-kun doing everything he can about other camps finding faults, I really did think of how greedy of a personality he had. That's why I want you to listen too. This is a matter of life or death, you know. Juukulius, life or... When Juukulius whispered that with an extremely serious face, Roswell said yes, your life, and nodded. Roswell, just like Subaru-kun and Emilia-sama know, Ram's constitution is just a little special. The vessel in her body takes in too much ability, which fills it up. Or perhaps you could say that the fuel to correspond with the flame called ability isn't ready. Subaru, I'm not that informed on it for you to say just like Subaru-kun and Emilia know. Roswell, is that so? Fiend, how about her being part of the Oni clan? Subaru, well that's... Of course, he knew about Ram and Rem being part of the Oni clan. He was saved more than twice by Rem, who could exert her Oni power to heart's content as she grew her horn. He also heard from Ram herself about how she lost her horn and was hornless. Therefore, Subaru thought that it wasn't really something that was surprising, but... Juukulius, Oni clan, you say? Subaru, Juukulius? The person who lowered his voice and revealed his astonishment was the person next to him, Juukulius. On his handsome face, he had his eyebrows lifted, and you could see disturbance in his yellow eyes. Juukulius, I've heard that the Oni clan has been destroyed. Roswell, about 10 years ago, the last village burned down. Ram was the last survivor. Sorry, including Rem, the survivors were the two sisters. He spoke about it in an implicate way, but Subaru did not, but into the conversation. He was more surprised at how those sisters were rarer than he expected, more than he was irritated. Emilia, is there a reason for the Oni clan's peril? Roswell, don't worry, Emilia-sama. The downfall of the Oni clan was an inevitable from natural selection. It's a result of them not going along with the flow of the times and clinging onto old customs. They definitely didn't lower in numbers because of discrimination and prejudice and collapsed. Emilia, oh. Emilia makes an understanding, melancholic look at Roswell's explanation. Emilia had a rare birthplace, being treated as a half-elf. It was natural for her to feel unease and sympathy for the two of them being left behind, and the Oni clan going into ruins. Subaru, we get that those two are all the members of the Oni clan. So, then what? Subaru senses the conversation starting to stagnate, so he moved the conversation with an intentionally loud voice. When Emilia and Juukulius lifted their faces in response to that voice, Roswell touched his chin and said, Roswell, putting aside Rem, who hasn't been acting with her body, there is a deficiency in Ram's body, just like I said earlier. This is because she lost an organ that is important for the Oni clan. That organ is the horn. Essentially, the enormous amount of mana in compensation for the horn to move the body that isn't prepared, so her body is always being ruined by pain and fatigue. Emilia, that's how it is. Roswell, it isn't unthinkable for you to be surprised. That girl is too firm. Not one says that caused her to have a frown on her face, after ale. In response to Emilia, who choked, Roswell shook his head slowly. Subaru was also surprised alongside with Emilia. He knew that Ram had no horn. From Ram's words, he also knew about how Ram had abilities that stood out before she lost her horn. It's just that, there was another penalty for lacking a horn that wasn't the decline of ability. He didn't realize it was continuing to ruin her, even now. Juukulius, I see. I've come to understand Sir Mather's thoughts. Then, Juukulius suddenly says that, only hearing the conversation to that stage, and he nods. Roswell says and raises his eyebrows in response to that, and then Subaru and Emilia look at each other too. These things just happened because of them confirming Ram's constitution. Juukulius continued to caress his bangs in front of Subaru and the others, who were shocked, as if he understood Roswell's request. Juukulius, the Oni race have traits like manipulating an enormous amount of mana and fighting strength with their strong bodies. The essential thing that supports those two traits is the horn, which no other species has. If an Oni's horn fails to fulfill its role and she suffers, there has to be a replacement that fulfills the role of the horn. Roswell, I see that having your name taken away has been so frustrating that it's made you smart. Being able to see through me that much with just this makes me feel good. Emilia, oh, so that's how it is. Roswell admires Juukulius for his explanation. Emilia also claps her hands from achieving understanding. The one person who was still perplexed and left behind was Subaru. When the situation came to magical powers, Subaru was nothing but slow to understand them, as he was an amateur. Subaru, don't just understand it by yourselves like that. What exactly does this mean? Juukulius, it's easy. Miss Ram's body is seeking the same amount of mana from the outside like when she had a horn. She lost her horn, and if she can't find the mana, then someone needs to find a way to give that mana. That's where we can come in. Roswell, although, normally I would take that role and supply her secretly at night. Subaru. Subaru's thoughts connected from Juukulius' lecture and Roswell's words. Every night, he would see Ram go to where Roswell was with excitement. To be honest, Subaru looked away from the vividness of the suspicious relationship between the master and the maid. Thinking about it again after understanding the circumstances, perhaps it was that sort of thing. Roswell, something come to your mind, Subaru-kun? Subaru, and no, nothing important. Go ahead and continue. Roswell, you sure? Even though he cleared up the misunderstanding he had for over a year, it wasn't worth correcting himself. Roswell's relatives were explosive with shoddiness with how they have tried to meet with the witch Echidna for generations and generations. It was hard to forget about how Roswell himself was remarkably attached to Echidna. He understood that he wasn't fooling around with Ram, and on the contrary, he knew how he was attached. Juukulius, there's a problem though, Sir Mathers. It's about that request. I feel like I'm not competent enough to take it up. To the side of Subaru, who was having useless thoughts, Juukulius shook his head apologetically, which makes Roswell squint his eyes. Roswell, humbly speaking, perhaps I won't support people from a different camp. Seems like that isn't your intention. Offering Ram mana would require fire, water, wind, and earth attributes. Just from those, you would be more fit for the job, rather than Emilia-sama. Juukulius, Sir Mathers, you probably have expectations for me because of these girls around me. Juukulius says that, being somewhat frail with a smile. Then, the man who responded reveals faint light flying around, and they saw the flickering of 6 kinds of light. They were known as the 6 quasi-spirits that Juukulius contracted with, however, as of right now. Juukulius, about my buds, as of now, their connection with me is gone. Though, as long as they still have their original titles, I don't have any qualms in accepting a request. Roswell, your contract with the spirits have been severed from having your name taken away. Huh. That being said, it seems like the spirits aren't trying to leave you. Juukulius, perhaps there are remains of the lost connection inside of them. Or maybe they were bleached and the contract is still there just because of how they can't see. Either way, I am only being saved by these buds' affection with how they're not abandoning someone unskilled like myself. I don't have much left in me, so I wonder if I'll be able to help with my poor abilities. Juukulius talks about the connection with the quasi-spirits and sighs. After that, he looked at Subaru just for a second. Subaru could not instantly figure out what he wanted with that look, so all he could only look troubled. Juukulius, as of right now, I am merely a devoted knight. My apologies. Roswell, I see. That's too bad. It is serious damage, but... Emilia, it's fine. If Juukulius can't do it, then leave it up to me. Roswell also lowered his tone at Juukulius, who felt sad, but the person who took his place and puffed up with pride was Emilia. When she energetically went in front of him, she brought out her own lesser spirits around her. Emilia, they're a little different from Juukulius' quasi-spirits, but if they're the lesser spirits, then I can borrow their powers too. The fire attribute is too strong with just my magic, but if I can borrow the powers of lesser spirits, then I can use other magical powers too. How's that sound? Roswell, of course, it won't just be him. I also felt like making the request to Emilia-sama, so there shouldn't be a problem if she feels like doing it. However, I think there will be extreme trouble at first with stabilizing the magical power. For assistance with that, please ask Beatrice for help. Subaru, Biko? Roswell, Beatrice is really excellent with magical power theories and using them. Right now she is connected with Subaru-kun, so I feel like it's some really wasted talent, but things are working out by using the lacking magical power, right? In regards to that knowledge, I would like you to refer yourself to Emilia-sama for that. Subaru, don't call it lacking magic. But, I understand. There wasn't any problem if Ram's burden would become lighter through Emilia and Beatrice's cooperation. Subaru started to understand, but right after he nodded, he cocked his head in puzzlement. Subaru, no wait. If that's the case, then why are you telling me instead of directly saying it to Beatrice? I mean, I want to listen too, but it would be logical to tell this to Biko. Roswell, because if I talk to Beatrice, obviously she will say it's meaningless and will refuse. Beatrice is more stingy with me than you think. Perhaps you could be a bit more lenient with your criticism towards me. Subaru, not happening. If I had to say which side I'm on, I would say that I'm completely on Beatrice's side, after all. He declined Roswell's request with ease, who had a pathetic look on his face. Things were done and that fact couldn't be changed. It wasn't a ditch where they were buried over about a year. The times weren't so nice that he'd simply open his heart with someone who he may have been killed by, had the events been a bit different. Subaru, now that I think about it, isn't it a bit troubling how I am doing things with people who've killed me and people who've beaten me up? Emilia, Subaru. You look like you're getting carried away with yourself. Subaru, do I really look like that sometimes? Anyhow, he accepted Roswell's request. Emilia and Beatrice would handle Ram. Emilia was motivated to do it, so there shouldn't be any problem if Subaru talked to Beatrice later. Roswell, I'm counting on you, Subaru-kun. Subaru, that was really praising of you. You rarely ever say things like that. Roswell, you are becoming admirable. This is the first time I've said to keep Ram away from my side, after all. That was the only thing he said that didn't give off a joking feeling. Roswell said that with a serious voice. When he looked away from Subaru's face, he looked up at the blue sky. Roswell, Ram and I should have no memory of the younger sister. But she really does have something that impresses me. Seeing Ram emotionally going against my opinion like that terrifies me. So, I want to ask you guys to talk to her. Subaru, yeah, I'll remember that. Ram still devoted herself to Roswell after the incident at Sanctuary. Even when Roswell said that anything and everything came second after the one and only thing that was important, Ram still had an opinion, as someone who went to such lengths to devote herself. If you could call that a change, then by no means was it a bad one. Or at least, it was far better being human and worrying with unmanageable emotions than it was burdening friends as an incomprehensible monster. Roswell, seems like it's time. Before he could speak, Roswell turned around. The mansion's door opens behind him, and 4 girls appeared on the other side. All of them were the Roswell residence's maids. Seeing them all together was a pretty magnificent view. That being said, one of the girls was sleeping, and another girl, who looked extremely similar to the sleeping one, had an appearance to prepare for the journey, so their beauty was slightly lacking. Frederica, Roswell-sama, the preparations for the 2 are set. Roswell, I appreciate your efforts. Ram, be careful on the trip. Roswell responds to Frederica, who gave her report very quietly, and called out to Ram, who was equipped for the journey. When Ram heard that, she pinched the edge of her skirt and bowed politely. Ram, Roswell-sama, thank you for granting my selfish request. I will definitely bring back results to show my respect. Roswell, I'll be looking forward to it. Although, make sure you don't do anything unreasonable. Also, make sure Emilia-sama and Subaru-kun don't do anything unreasonable either. That is also part of your role too, after all. Ram, I am fully aware of that. He wanted to give a retort like I don't want to hear that coming from you, but Ram's look made him silent. Subaru gave in to that look, and looked at the short figure next to Ram. REM was there. She was in clothes suitable for the trip, and was now being carried by Petra's wheelchair. She was on something Subaru reproduced from his original world through his memory. A model of the wheelchair had already existed in this world, but it had quite the amount of work put into the remodeling. It had a caster-like front wheel that wouldn't be a hindrance when changing directions, along with a scaffold and a seat. Of course, a seat belt and a cushion to protect her head were implemented as well. It was a one-of-a-kind wheelchair that Subaru insisted on making to Roswell, and he made it with his own money. Subaru, I'm worried about the maintenance when we get far, but... Frederica, Subaru-sama is a little handy, and the materials are what they are, so I think it could handle being used for 2 months. Of course, please don't do anything unreasonable. Petra, please be careful, Subaru-sama. He receives Frederica's consent, and is entrusted the wheelchair's handle from Petra. He accepts it, and when he went behind REM, he felt a lot more ease this way compared to carrying her and going forward. This was because the road was pavement, and so it wouldn't be effective in the desert, on grass, or on gravel. Subaru, okay, looks like it'll work. Petra, Frederica, you guys take care too. Frederica, please leave Roswell-sama up to us. Petra, we'll be taking care of Otto-san and Garfield-san too. Petra and Frederica respond to Subaru as they nod at him while he moved the wheelchair. Even if the trip took 2 months, Otto and the others at Pristella would probably be healed, and they should come back to the Roswell residence. He left that up to the maids, who would take care of stuff while they were gone. Subaru pushed the wheelchair and turned towards the dragon carriage. Subaru, alright then, it's regretful, but I guess we should depart now. Ram, why do I have to be bossed around by Barusu? Don't get so full of yourself. Subaru, I'm not bossing you around though. How about you take over then? Ram, do I look that shameless to you? I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't make me behave like that, as a maid who needs to be graceful and considerate. Subaru, what is up with you? Are you at that age where you can do nothing but complain? Ram, that's not really it. It's just that. Ram cuts off her sentence and gives a meaningful look at Subaru's hand. As of right now, Subaru was pushing Ram's wheelchair. Subaru guessed the meaning of that look, and he let out a deep sigh. Subaru, if you want to change places, then just say so. Ram, if you think about why I'm coming and my purpose, then letting me handle her is a given. As for guessing what I wanted without me putting it into words, I guess I can see you in a better light. Just a little. When Subaru reluctantly gave up his position, Ram took his place and pushed the wheelchair. She showed care for her sleeping sister sitting on the wheelchair as it slowly headed to the dragon carriage and went forward. Subaru opened and closed his hand for no reason as he saw them off. Then, a small hand gently grabbed his hand from the side. Subaru, oh, it's Biko. Beatrice, you don't have to make a pathetic look like that. It's not like your feelings for that girl are weaker than the feelings her sister has, so you don't have to worry, I suppose. Just be yourself and do what you can do, I suppose. Subaru, that's not quite, or well, that's how it is. It wasn't as if he felt like his role was taken away from him, but looking from the outside, perhaps the look on his face indicated that he didn't understand it that way. Subaru touches his cheek with the hand that wasn't occupied, pulls on it, and pinches it. Then, this time his hand was taken by a different white hand. Emilia, yeah, I'll take that hand. Subaru, Ofu, Emilia-tan. Beatrice, after that girl wakes up, it'll be easy for both of your hands to get occupied. I'm interested in seeing what Subaru will do about that. Emilia, I might be interested in that too. Subaru gets caught in between Emilia and Beatrice, and he gives a troubled look. However, he was only returned with a serious look and an anticipating look. To make matters worse, Petra's look was piercing him from behind, and Ram was even throwing him a cold, scornful look in front of the dragon carriage as she turned around. He was being unbelievably surrounded on all sides. Then, Juukulius lets out a hum as he saw that and gave a nod. In response to that desiring reaction, Subaru gave a grand smile. Subaru, what is it? If you want to say something, say it. Alright, go ahead. Juukulius, really? Alright then, I'll just say one thing. You really could not be more blessed, being surrounded by beautiful girls like that. I can't help feeling a lot of doubt about whether or not you're satisfying all of those flowers with your hands. Subaru, what is this? I'm starting to get blamed. Did I do something wrong? Juukulius shrugged his shoulders with a shocked face. The pathetic shout Subaru gave him went up into the sky. Unfortunate for him, there was no domestic officials or top officers at this place to follow up on his statement. Subaru had no choice but to fight alone in this upcoming 2-month journey. He understood that reality. He felt the trust and the deep affection he had towards the warmth he felt from his hands fill up his chest. He felt anxiety in his chest about not falling behind. That was the type of morning it was when they'd depart. Chapter 6, The Juukulius Inscription. The journey started with a morning filled of unease, and the journey was long precisely because of how much distance was traveled in close to 1 month. However, no significant accidents happened along the way. They went straight along the main road towards east. It was a boring journey where nothing happened. Subaru, it was like that with the round trip to Pristella, and it was like that with Life is Plain, but the piece of the Lugnica kingdom along the way is pretty nice. Juukulius, the patrolling to maintain the main road and to maintain public order is essential to protect the kingdom's peace. Lugnica is particularly thorough with things like that, even when compared to other countries. They should have low rates of damage from groups of bandits and maybeists. Subaru, are you saying other countries aren't like that? Juukulius, the Gustico kingdom isn't able to maintain their main road smoothly in the first place with how it's always covered in snow. It's deep in the snow that was there from the start. As for the Volcanica kingdom and the Kararaji city-state, there are people with different manners and customs in proportion to the many races jumbled together. In that sense, it may be hard to say that public order is kept there. Subaru, I see. The two Earth Dragons' heads were lined up, and they were running energetically as Subaru and Juukulius had a conversation. Subaru's Patrash and Juukulius' Equestrian Dragon were leading them ahead, and were pulling the large dragon carriage with their heads. Everyone in the dragon carriage would be late to react to the occasion of emergencies. That was the lineup they had, but as you could see from the conversation they were having out of boredom, the journey was peaceful. Subaru, Juukulius, Subaru. On top of the journey being boring, once he saw how the scenery wasn't changing, he started to yawn. Subaru put his hand on his mouth and became full of drowsiness, as Juukulius gave him a blaming look. He had his body on his loving dragon. He quickly lifts his bangs that were kept from swaying through windbreak divine protection. Juukulius, I understand that you want to get rid of this feeling of tension, but the moments you loosen your stiffness are the most dangerous ones. I won't say that you're letting your mind wander off, but I won't allow you to act in a way that anyone would perceive as lazy. Subaru, just how much are you gonna say just because of one yawn? Even you at least yawn too. Right. Juukulius, of course I have those kind of bodily functions. But, if you have the self-consciousness of a knight, then it's possible to hold it in when in front of other people, you know. That what you're still missing. Subaru, yeah. He was pressing for a reaction with piercingly sarcastic force, but Subaru was already becoming a master of parrying it. It was already nearing 20 days in this journey where he was accompanied by Juukulius. Making the Earth Dragons that were always side by side run from Pristella to the mansion, and now the Augria Sand Dunes, would allow him to learn to deal with Juukulius. Juukulius, I thought it was a part of manners to look at the person you're talking with when having a serious conversation? Subaru, the person is looking away during the serious conversation because of the timing. You should take it easy too. You're straining yourself too much. Juukulius, you and I aren't watching out, and why? Subaru, you don't have to tense up that much. They won't attack us so quickly. If they try to fight us, we won't get killed at such a spacious place. Subaru interrupts him, and says that as he cracks his head. Juukulius blinks his eyes, as if Subaru had said something unexpected. After that, this handsome man let out a small sigh. Juukulius, is it clear that I'm flustered right now in your eyes? Subaru, yeah, I have a feeling it's a shot in the dark though. But, I feel like everyone thinks you're straining yourself. More than USU, actually, you might just be acting like your usual self. Juukulius, as of right now, you're the only one who knows that it's just me being my usual self after all. Subaru, yeah. When Juukulius lowered his tone, Subaru also naturally dropped his. They couldn't hear the girls' conversations in the back in the dragon carriage, so the girls shouldn't be able to hear their conversations either. They were brothers and they had various complications in their positions, but as of right now, they were working together. Perhaps this was the time when he should speak a little more frankly. Subaru, it's been talked about with Roswell before, but how are your quasi-spirits? Juukulius, it's just like I said before. The buds are gathered around me, but they won't rest their feathers on the arm I hold out as a perch. It seems my words won't reach them either. Juukulius raises his arm in response to Subaru's question, and he reveals the quasi-spirits. The 6 quasi-spirits shining faintly still had been floating around Juukulius, who made the earth dragon run. However, they flickered on his held-out hand as if in confusion, in attempts to go away. He thinks, I see, it really does seem like Juukulius has lost his contract with his quasi-spirits. Subaru, can you not recontract them? You're attracting them somehow, so doesn't that mean your divine protection is working? Juukulius, it seems like divine protection of gathering spirits is still going strong. And on the contrary, that's involved in the mysteriousness of their recognition. It's like having certain large, incomprehensible, unmanageable emotions. Subaru, not sure if I should say it like this, but how about taking measures through other spirits? Juukulius, I would have considered that idea if I was a spirit user that could borrow the powers of lesser spirits that go everywhere like Emilia-sama, but I can't bring out the spirit's powers perfectly that way. I needed a few years to bind with the quasi-spirit buds too, after all. Subaru, well, it is true that Emilia-tan can't bring out Puck's average power from other spirits too. I guess becoming partners with a spirit is a special thing after all. Juukulius, Emilia and the Great Spirit. And like you and Beatrice-sama. It was rough. Subaru couldn't say something like go find the next spirits right away as someone who was a spirit user like him. It would be like asking him if he'd let go of Beatrice after bonds were cut off. Of course, he would raise his middle finger and refuse as a response. As for Juukulius, his relationship with the 6 quasi-spirits were the exact same thing. Juukulius, therefore, as of right now, I can only use sword techniques to fulfill my duties as a knight. Of course, I don't think the sword is inferior to using spirits, but it's true that my abilities make it insufficient. Subaru, this is also a journey to get that back, and you saying that with your sword skills is mere sarcasm. And if you're fighting me, it's even more sarcastic. Juukulius was talking about his damaged, insufficient ability with spirit techniques. Subaru surely did become exhausted from that strength a year ago at the capital's parade grounds. Subaru did become better compared to back then, but he didn't feel like the difference was covered. From Juukulius' point of view, fighting Subaru at that time was like taking candy from a baby. It was like he was fighting a 5-year-old Subaru. That was just about how different their levels of strength were. Subaru, Reinhard is also like that. You guys have a bad habit of underestimating yourselves, huh? Trying to be too humble will turn into arrogance. I think those type of words are used everywhere. Juukulius, I want to return the same phrase to you, but forgetting about you and I, Reinhard isn't being humble or underestimating of himself. Most likely. Subaru, not being humble or underestimating. At the same time, he imagined him as the redhead hero, but he puzzled his head at the difference in recognition. He never thought that he'd run into differing opinions on Reinhard, because from anyone's perspective, he was the strongest, completely peerless Superman. In response to Subaru's doubt, Juukulius said nope and shook his head. Juukulius, in regards to Reinhard's true strength, you and I both have the same high evaluation for it. Most likely, everyone he knows shares the same sentiment. They all think that he's reached the end of humanity, or that perhaps he's transcended it. Subaru, it's amazing how that isn't an overstatement. Juukulius, he himself is fully aware of how it's not his true strength. I first met him when I was around 10 years old, but it's never changed. Subaru, ever since you met him when you were 10? Seriously? Subaru becomes astonished at Juukulius' recollections while he gripped onto Patrash's bridle. Just when did Reinhardt become the person who he is now? He thought it was quite the philosophical question, but at the very least, it seemed that the version of himself from close to 10 years ago had been completed. Which meant that he carried a very heroic fate on his shoulders. Subaru, Reinhard has been a sword saint since then? Juukulius, he was still 5 years old when he succeeded the sword saint's divine protection. The previous sword saint was Theoresia van Astria-sama. She died in the Great Conquest 15 years ago, and the divine protection was transferred through Reinhard's grandmother. Subaru, that's how it was, huh? She died after fighting with the white whale and still continued to be the sword saint, humiliated after death. She was Reinhard's grandmother, Wilhelm's wife, and this time her spirit went back to the heavens. But 15 years ago, the divine protection was inherited inside of Reinhard. Subaru, how does he feel? Juukulius, Subaru, he took over his grandmother's divine protection ever since he was 5, and to make matters worse, he succeeded hero's blood, right? I can't imagine how he feels. Subaru somewhat understood the weight of having parents' expectations. Subaru knew the pain of being crushed by the weight of the expectations people had around him. Of course, the weight and the responsibilities Subaru and Reinhard carried were extremely different, so comparing himself to him may have been rude in itself. Subaru, I really am strong. I'm so strong that I don't have nights where I wish to have an excessive amount of strength, only having sad thoughts about how I'm weak and am not good enough. Juukulius, I feel like that's pretty groundless. Subaru, shut up. Subaru gets made fun of in the middle of his important talk, and he clicks his tongue. Subaru, anyways, I personally feel the worries of the other extreme. I don't think Reinhard is the same as he was when he was 5, but I do wonder how he felt. Juukulius, as you'd expect, I also don't know what he felt back in those days. But that was the one time when Juukulius lifed his face as he cut off his words. Juukulius gripped tightly onto the bridle, looking in front of him, and squinted at the sunlight he bathed in. Juukulius, the time I saw Reinhard was the big turning point for me. You could even somehow hear the triumph in those words. Juukulius was squinting from the sunlight, but perhaps he may have not been squinting because of the sun. Perhaps he looked at Reinhard at that time with the same type of eyes. Subaru, which means that you and Reinhard have known each other for about 10 years, I guess. I do think that barely satisfies the requirements for you guys to be childhood friends, but is that right? Juukulius, no? Yes, that was when I became aware of Reinhard, but he found out about me long after. He's known me since I was appointed as an Imperial Knight. That happened when I was 16, so I've known him personally for 6 years. Subaru, that's a very big empty period of time, isn't it? Juukulius, at that time, I had no capabilities that he had, as he took over the title of the Sword Saint. He made me realize that to the point of it being painful, and that was my beginning. Juukulius said his words quietly, while his tone of voice was passionate on the contrary. In response to the distant look he had in his yellow eyes, Subaru nodded at that one word, beginning. On top of those obscure words, that day was probably vivid within Juukulius. If that was Juukulius' beginning, then it was a given for it to be clear in his memory. Subaru's own memory of his own beginning was hot in his chest, scorching his soul. The time he was saved by Amelia in a different world, the time REM supported his broken back, the time when he took Beatrice's hand in a fire, all of those times were the beginning to Subaru. Subaru, when you say it started from there, does that mean you were surprisingly naughty as a kid? Like a profligate noble or a profligate son? He goes against the flow of his self-inserting feelings and said that with an intentionally teasing voice. There's no way he believed that it was limited to just Juukulius, but he really did think that he was a young gaudy noble when he first met him. And if it were to be a story, the type of haughty life this young noble lived in his boyhood seemed to be clear. Subaru put in those feelings, and changed the topic to change the flow of the conversation, which makes Juukulius suddenly loosen his lips as he says. Juukulius, I'd like you to change the way you express it. Just a little, but there are parts that I can't deny. Subaru, seriously. You really were a gaudy noble. Did you kick commoners from the top of a horse, and did you persistently pressure servants by bullying them? Juukulius, I can't help but wonder why you started to be that gleeful. Juukulius gave a cold look at Subaru, who got excited. After that, Juukulius peeked at the back. He wasn't only interested in the dragon carriage, but the girls in it as well. Of course, he didn't have to go through lengths to confirm that he couldn't hear their conversations, but it was a matter of him feeling like doing it. Juukulius, how much do you know about my lineage? Subaru, nothing. Juukulius, you answered so immediately that it seems you felt good about it. He really did have zero background knowledge. Subaru dexterously threw out his chest on top of the dragon, and Juukulius smiles wryly at him. After that, he felt his knight's sword on his waist. Perhaps it was handed down through Juukulius' family. From his face, you could see that he had hesitation about whether he had the qualifications to wield it himself at this time. Juukulius, I am not the original eldest son of the Juukulius family. Juukulius, to put it more accurately, I should say that I am not the official eldest son. Alviero Juukulius is the real head of the Juukulius family. Klein Juulius was his younger brother, which makes him my father, although he's already passed away, and the son-in-law is the head of the family. Subaru did not respond to the words that were more surprising than he expected. It was difficult to say how much the structure of this world's noble society meshed with Subaru's knowledge of the society he knew, but Juukulius' position definitely was complicated. Also, in that case, then how's the position of his younger brother, Joshua Juukulius? He missed his older brother Juukulius, and as of now, that boy was lost from the memories of the world. Juukulius, I don't know what relationship the actual me has with Joshua, who is left at Priestella. Just from him not being left in me, perhaps he is a younger brother that has succeeded the blood of my real father, Klein Juukulius. Or maybe he really is a legitimate child that succeeded the blood of my foster father, Albert Juukulius. Subaru, what if it's different? Juukulius, siblings is only a figure of speech, so perhaps our relationship would essentially be cousins. In that case, Joshua Juukulius would most likely become the head of the Juukulius family. Juukulius said that calmly, and just from that, it thrusts at him as the truth. At this point, Juukulius himself didn't understand the complexity of this way of speaking, even though he really was the one with the position. If Juukulius and Joshua were real siblings, then Juukulius would be the one to succeed the Juukulius family. However, if Juukulius was not Joshua's real brother, then it would be correct to say that Joshua would be the successor of the Juukulius family. And then Juukulius did not know how to confirm that Joshua's existence was taken away from the world, and Juukulius had lost his memories of his brother, and he did not know where he was. Juukulius, it was something unavoidable, but when I think about that, it makes my position very complicated. Not knowing about your own tomorrow isn't very appealing, although as of now, I should worry more about myself staggering than I should about the future of the Juukulius family. Juukulius said that in a seemingly joking way, perhaps because Subaru received a surprising shock. Subaru's mouth was dry. He grinds his teeth while feeling irritation in his stomach. He was ridiculously worried about Juukulius with how he was right now. Juukulius, since I had that type of history, I was unsteady back in those days. My foster father led me up to the royal castle, and that's when I showed the poor etiquette I was taught, and I sought to go home. That's when I saw Reinhard, who was still 8 years old. That's all there is to it. Juukulius chose to end the conversation in a bit of a forcing way. He didn't have the courage to give a retort or give some sort of clever remark. He saw Juukulius look ahead in a lonesome way, and he stopped biting his molars. And then, what came out right away was a question. Subaru, why'd you suddenly feel like telling that to me? Juukulius, I did feel like you were the one that was listening to me. Perhaps I was mistaken? Subaru, no, that's true and all, that's my bad, but that's not what I'm getting at. Isn't it weird for you to have this kind of talk with me? Juukulius, no it isn't. That stuff was common knowledge for Reinhard and Ferris, people among the Imperial Knights. Of course, Anastasia-sama also knows too. It's not anything special. Subaru did not understand one bit, as his face turned into a frown. Even if he said that everyone knew about it, that didn't mean it was something he could spread around. As expected, he felt like they seemed to be unnatural words. Perhaps Juukulius understood Subaru's discontent from his frown. He pulls onto the bridle, and quickens the love dragon's pace just a bit. Juukulius, yes, it's something that everyone knows. So that's why I might have wanted you to know about it now. I might have wanted you to know, the person who knows me the most in this world right now. The blue earth dragon accelerates while swinging its tail, and Juukulius' expression could no longer be seen. That being said, he wasn't going so fast that he'd leave him behind. It was a way of him being as smug as usual by simply declaring to end the conversation. Subaru, it's fine. Thanks for taking care of me, Patrash. The running jet black earth dragon lifts her head and peeks at Subaru. In response to her gesture of saying shall we rival the earth dragon ahead, Subaru showed his thanks and petted the head of that lady. Subaru, that was uncharacteristic of me. He poured out those small, perverse words from his mouth. Was he becoming weak? Or perhaps, was he putting on airs as a protagonist of a tragedy? As a matter of fact, irritating was the only way to express his feelings. Subaru, damn it. What am I, an idiot? No, I am an idiot. Subaru scratches his head, and he released his irritation only from his mouth. In the end, he had no precise response to what Juukulius said this time. And he would have no precise response until they were before the Augria sand dunes. An answer wouldn't come even when the party arrived at the Malura town that was near the sand dunes. End of chapters 4 through 6, The Reason to Bring You Out.